All right. I think we can get started. Thanks everybody for coming tonight. This is a workshop to let the council kind of have its first review of the comprehensive plan. The consultants at Barry Dunn, the steering committee, and city staff have been working on this since April of 2023, I believe. Yeah, it started in summer of 2022, so yeah, April of 2023. It's been about a year and 8 months now. And that's been through all the phases of the plan, from public engagement and visioning, inventory and analysis, policies, recommendations, implementation, and now the final plan, which is the stage we're at. Tonight we have Representative from Barry Dunn to kind of walk us through the final product, how it's structured, some of the elements of the final plan, and then I'll kind of talk a little bit about state compliance and how we managed to include that information in the plan as well, and then I'll open up for questions from you all, and then the public too if they have any. So, Carrie and Ellie, well, I guess I'll introduce myself. I'm Matt Williams, City Planner. Brian, do you want to?
I'm Brian Langley, Chair of the Committee of Downtown on South Street.
And then Allie and Carrie, if you'd like to do introductions.
Sure, good evening. Oh, Matt, we can't see you. Is there a camera?
Yeah, it's pointed at, but it was no weird angle, so I turned it off. But let me see if I turn you up a little bit more, if it makes a difference.
It's fine if not.
That way.
It would be nice to see you all.
Yeah.
You can sit up here if you want, man.
Huh? No, I'm good. I'll sit back. But, well, I'll turn it on. You can let me know if you want to have it on or not, but probably won't be that useful to do.
We go. Great. Thank
Let them
you.
know other councils are here too.
Good evening, Carrie Willett with Barry Dunn, the project manager.
I'm Allie Toby, also with Very Done.
Well, Nate's going to do something to make your view better.
Matt, before we get started, if there are members of the comp plan committee in the audience,
Yeah.
would they be able, or if that's part of this, just introduce themselves?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry?
would you like to introduce yourself as a member
Sure,
of the
Rick
steering
Wiles,
committee?
planning board, and also a member of the steering committee.
All right.
I was as well, a member of the
That's
steering
right.
committee.
And then
That's
and
right.
former counselor Casey Hansen was also a member. All right, so if you guys would like to jump in the presentation, and get started.
And then share my screen with you. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, thank you for taking the time to meet with us tonight. We are excited to be here, wrapping up this project for the comprehensive plan. As Matt mentioned, this was a really big effort with city staff, the steering committee, this council, all the lots of other boards and committees, as well as quite a few community members. So that might not be easy to see within the document, but it was really a very big effort, and we were happy to support the city with the plan. So I'm gonna jump into the agenda. And we know that you've heard from us. Most of you have heard from us in the past. I'm gonna give just an overview of the whole project, timeline, and the different phases of the project. We'll go over the plan structure, so why the plan is structured the way it is and how to navigate the document. We know it's quite a lengthy document. And then we'll walk through the different sections of the plan themselves. We'll go through that pretty quickly and want to leave plenty of time for conversation and questions. So if you think of something that comes up, we can certainly go back and spend more time on things later. As we have quite a bit of time to discuss this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Allie to jump into the project overview.
Thank you, Carrie. I think this slide might look familiar to, all of you, but wanted to spend a little bit of time talking through kind of the overall timeline and key points throughout this project. So as Matt mentioned, the project kicked off in April 2023, and throughout the project, kind of not reflected here. There were opportunities for community input and community engagement throughout this project. And as I talk through this, I'll touch on what some of those activities were within each of those phases. So the first phase, that inventory and analysis phase, kicked off at the beginning of the project and ran through October 2023. This was an initial data gathering collection effort outlining current conditions, strengths and challenges within the city, and then projected needs for the future. So this includes data collected from the city, a look at kind of recent planning initiatives, previous planning initiatives, as well as data collected from regional, state, and federal agencies. So census data, American Community Survey data, as well as state data as well. So that full inventory and analysis is an appendix within the plan, so that last appendix piece. And during this phase, we met with city staff as well as local leaders, including small and large business owners, nonprofit groups, conservation organizations, and social service providers to collect some more qualitative data in addition to some of that harder quantitative information as well. And then concurrent to phase one, we have the visioning phase. So targeting kind of very broad community input on future needs and priorities and challenges and getting at the community's vision for the future. And then input collected throughout that process was reviewed and evaluated by the steering committee to develop the vision statement and the guiding principles. And I'll get into those in a little bit more detail as we talk through the structure of the plan. But want to spend a little bit of time talking through some of the engagement that ran through this process. That can also be found in kind of the introduction section of the plan, and then a larger summary of engagement can be found in an appendix as well. So engagement activities included an initial kickoff expo at the Parklet. City staff and steering committee members and the consulting team were present to collect some initial input from folks who are in and around the downtown passing through, as well as to share some initial project information. And then city staff and steering committee members attended community events throughout that summer and fall in 2023. Again, sharing project information, encouraging folks to get involved on some of the ongoing engagement. So the Social Pinpoint site ran throughout the project, and that's a digital engagement platform where folks can go in and provide input at a time and place that's convenient for them. So city staff and steering committee members were out in the community encouraging folks to get involved in that process. And then when the community survey was live, encouraging folks to take that survey. There was also a mailer sent out to share the survey with addresses throughout the city, getting folks kind of aware and involved in that process in a way that's easy and convenient for them. And then subcommittee meetings were held in August and September that year, so getting some initial feedback on the different topic areas within the comprehensive plan, so everything from natural and water resources, historic resources, through things like transportation, housing, and economic development. And then there was an initial living and working in Ellsworth public forum that was specifically targeted for employers and employees in Ellsworth, looking at things like childcare, transportation, housing, and economy. And then again, all of that information was compiled and reviewed by the steering committee and used to develop a vision statement for the future. And then that vision statement and those guiding principles really served as the foundation and the direction for the rest of the plan. So through phase 3, 4, and 5, really pulling from that community vision and community input to develop policies and action items that reflect both state requirements as well as the community's vision for the future. And throughout that process, developed policies and actions, a future land use map, and then shared this back out with the community through subcommittee meetings as well as focus groups to get specific feedback on the action items. And then another Living in Ellsworth public forum was held to get specific input on housing needs and future land use scenarios for the future. And then broadly, a visual preference survey was shared as well to get a little bit more detail on kind of the size, scale, and design of different types of development that might be appropriate in different areas throughout the city. And then the implementation planning phase took those policies and actions and built out a matrix. And Carrie will touch a little bit more in detail on this shortly, but during this phase, the steering committee also identified some short-term priority action items, which are specifically called out within the narrative and the body of the document. And then all of that information from the first 4 phases was compiled into the final plan that you all see in front of you today. So next want to look a little bit more at kind of how the plan is structured. So at the beginning, kind of an executive summary looking at a high level, kind of what's included in the plan and what the process looked like. But up front in the introduction, looking at kind of an overview of the document, looking at what is a comprehensive plan, why did the city engage in this process, how is the community vision reflected, and how is this plan developed. Also looks at kind of recent planning initiatives, some current challenges and community feedback, and then some of those key themes looking forward. And then touching on that community vision and guiding principles as the kind of upfront context in this plan. So stating that vision statement and those guiding principles, and then having some more detail on what each of those can include and look like in Ellsworth today and what the community would like to see in the future, as well as calling out those priority action items. And then future land use is kind of that section that connects the community values and that vision statement, those action items, to the built environment. So what are some trends and projections in the future? What are the community needs, and how can land use in the future connect those things to create outcomes that support the community's vision? This section also includes some land use categories that outline some general kind of uses, some general goals for what each of those land use categories will look like in the future. And then the implementation plan piece being that guidance for how actions can be prioritized and implemented in the future. And then some appendices with supporting information, including glossary of terms, reference plans and studies throughout the document, a larger engagement summary, and the full inventory and analysis document. So I want to spend a little bit of time in depth with each of these sections. So with that introduction, in addition to kind of what is a comprehensive plan and how to look through this document, have some more specific call outs on how the community engagement process, so how is the community kind of reached out to, what were the touch points there to provide input, and then what did that overall timeline look like, as well as some key themes that emerged throughout that process. The looking back section touches on Ellsworth's history and its development patterns and how those two things inform some of the existing conditions in the city today, as well as how recent planning efforts have kind of identified some of those challenges as well and identified some priorities on a more specific topic level looking forward. And then kind of combining that community input and looking forward, there were kind of three broad ideas that emerged throughout that process, including a connected community, economic vitality, and sustainable growth. So in the plan, looking forward, kind of what is important at a high level to the community. And then kind of the next section, the community vision. So again, this was developed through a review of input and from the community and the steering committee through a visioning workshop. Reviewed a couple of different examples of what a vision statement could look like. They can take on a lot of different forms, but kind of broadly very ideal scenarios of in 2035, what does Ellsworth look like? What does it feel like? And what's important to the community to be at that point in time. So the vision statement touches on kind of that guiding North Star vision for where Ellsworth wants to be in the future. So a city that's rooted in tradition, that honors the people and places of its past, while also supporting future growth and innovation for a livable community for all. Ellsworth flourishes by finding a balance between urban and rural, preservation and growth, and a year-round economy and seasonal tourism. The city balances meeting the needs of community members to enhance livability with fiscal responsibility for long-term success. And then along with that community vision, the steering committee developed 9 guiding principles. Carrie's going to go a little bit more in depth with what each of these look like, so I'm not going to read these to you, but want to touch on what these guiding principles are. So the guiding principles are broadly kind of aspirational ideals that align with the vision and values of the community, but provide a little bit more detail on what those priorities are. So they provide a little bit more structure for understanding what the challenges today are and how to implement actions and what the community would like to see for each of those areas moving forward. And so these are related to specific feedback from community members and were developed and refined by the steering committee. And then later in the process, as actions were identified and finalized, the steering committee prioritized and called out priority action items that were seen as the most impactful, urgent, or influential in addressing and implementing each of those guiding principles. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Carrie to talk a little bit more about each of those.
Thank you, Ally. Before we jump into each of the principles, I just wanted to note that, Ally went over all the engagement that was done and started to talk about the feedback that we got that was the foundation for the vision and principles developed by the steering committee. The structure of this document, as Ally went through, is quite different than the last comprehensive plan, but a lot of the values and a lot of the concerns from the community and things that people want to see prioritized were not that different. And so there's certainly some big changes that have happened, across the whole region, state, country, that have impacted the content of this plan, but largely what people value has not changed dramatically. So the principles are really the big picture priorities, goals for the community. There's a little bit of overlap. The way the plan is structured, we talk through each of these principles. So what is the background and context around this issue and this goal, and then laying out priority action items that were identified by the steering committee. So these were not necessarily the most important across the board, but taking into consideration how important the action item is related to the principle, how quickly or easily it can be accomplished, and so things that should happen earlier in the implementation process, and how impactful it will be to the community. So they went through and looked at all of these and looked at those in action items in consideration to how they relate to these principles. The full list of action items and policies is within the implementation matrix. That includes quite a few required actions and policies that are required by the state. But the steering committee really wanted to focus the attention of the plan on certain areas and with certain actions. So that's why this is laid out the way it is. Related to each of these principles within the text of within the document, we also include some reference to representative comments from the community through the survey and other community input. So just tying the principles and the action items back to what we heard from the community earlier in the process. So the first principle, cultivate a community rich in the arts and promote the cultural history of Down East Maine. Certainly the downtown, the physical character of Main Street and the downtown is really central to the sense of community in Ellsworth, and so protecting that as well as using what is there, the existing arts and cultural amenities and other things to support economic growth and to continue to create and protect that sense of community in the city. Principle 2, protect and preserve the natural environment and rural lifestyle and encourage sustainable and resilient growth. Certainly natural areas, open space, as well as the city's water, surface waters, the river and lakes are central to what has drawn people to Ellsworth and continues to draw people to Ellsworth. So protection of those areas for environmental purposes as well as for recreation and maintaining the character of the community. Principle 3, prioritize affordable and attainable housing to meet the needs of a diverse population. I think the most notable thing related to housing is just the drastic change in the housing market in Ellsworth. Other parts of the state have been, have had more of a need for affordable housing, for a longer time. In 2019, when you look at the median income and median home price, Ellsworth was by those standards considered relatively affordable, and that changed quite a bit just in a few years. So looking at those changes along with the changing demographics, smaller household sizes, an older population, and we will get into this more with you in a couple of weeks when we talk about the housing study, but that has come up more and more of not just access to housing, but the types of housing that are available in the city. And then we heard quite a bit from employers on the impact of the housing crisis on their ability to attract and retain workers and to grow their business. So it's really starting to have has been having a broader impact for the region. Principle 4, support a vibrant and safe downtown that renews the connection to the waterfront and enhances the city as a regional destination. So being a service center, Ellsworth is central to the regional economy. It's also becoming more of a destination. I think that we heard a lot that people want to see that more, see it become more of a destination. And then again, that idea of balance, so balancing the needs of year-round residents and continuing to make sure those services and amenities are available to support that population, but while also encouraging tourism and allowing businesses in the community to benefit from tourism. Principle 5, address infrastructure and facility needs by proactively developing safe, reliable, and sustainable solutions. Like many other communities in the state, the city has aging infrastructure and facilities. Also, concern about increasing costs for maintaining and constructing new infrastructure and maintaining existing infrastructure. So we talk a little bit more about this in the public facilities and fiscal capacity section about just planning, the importance of planning for these larger capital projects and thinking about the infrastructure growth along with the future land use plan and what the city wants to see in terms of growth and directing growth to the urban core. Principle 6, support educational assets and increase access to learning opportunities for community members at all stages of life. Certainly an interest in education related to growing and supporting the workforce, including supporting career growth, the importance of childcare related to economic growth, as well as just quality of life. We'll really value access to opportunities to learn and continue to be involved in the community through community programs and things like that. So multiple aspects of that principle. Principle 7, support health and wellness and foster community connections through all phases of life. Again, thinking about that connected community and how people can continue to be engaged and involved in the community as the demographics of the city change and as there's transition, and then thinking about how the built environment really impacts how people can connect to one another, whether that's through physical spaces or ability to how people can access different amenities in the city. Principle 8, create and maintain a balance between a resilient year-round economy and robust tourism economy. A lot of the economic development actions focus on quality of life improvements, so things that will benefit residents as well as what draws people to the city as visitors, as tourists. Things like the recreational amenities and great parks and a downtown with lots of different variety of shops and businesses and services. Also infrastructure improvements to support that long-term economic stability and again, thinking about where infrastructure, where to focus investment in infrastructure. And then finally, leveraging downtown assets, so also going back to the principle around downtown and downtown vibrancy. There's so much that Ellsworth has to offer and a lot of the amenities and assets within the city, a lot of people don't know about, and so kind of looking at ways to enhance those and bring those to spotlight. Principle 9, expand active and vehicular transportation options and develop local traffic management solutions. Traffic was a big concern from community members that we heard. We don't have a grand plan for addressing traffic. There will be, I think, the idea of a busy and vibrant downtown is a good thing, and so what the action items are more focused on connectivity, safety, equity, and addressing transportation, traffic impacts and transportation in a more incremental way through looking at long-term, through looking at land use patterns and development, as well as some other ways that traffic can be mitigated in the city. So we mentioned future land use in the context of several of those principles. In looking at this map, it has not changed substantially from the prior comp plan. Still looking at directing growth to the urban core, thinking about where there could be opportunities for new residential growth as well as commercial growth. The changes include allowing for some transition areas. We look at the light blue, that's the neighborhood mixed use. So thinking about that transition from more heavily commercial areas to residential areas, in allowing for more protection within the rural conservation, so expanding that rural conservation, which is the drinking water district, to include some areas around Green and Graham Lake. Right now there's a lot of development potential in a lot of Ellsworth that is undeveloped, so kind of looking at ways to limit more sprawling type development in those areas. And then finally allowing for some, we have in the bright green, 2 very small rural village nodes to potentially serve as a hub for residents in outer neighborhoods, so some more convenience type businesses to be allowed there, but and to reduce number of trips people might need to take to go into downtown. So the future land use looks at the land use categories and identifies the purpose, what land uses are appropriate in those areas, and what the character of the built environment in those areas should be. So that's all described and laid out in the future land use section of the plan. Again, still quite similar to what was in the last plan, but more focused on how development will be directed to areas within the urban core. So planning for growth, these include sections that are required by the state to be, and as part of a comp plan. But especially important for Ellsworth, I think, looking at fiscal capacity, again, we heard quite a bit about concern about taxes from residents, so thinking about these action items and policies within that context, and providing some guidance on how to move forward, understanding that the city does not have unlimited funds to implement the plan. So thinking about new ideas for funding strategies, or laying out some guidance for capital planning, and to look at that through the lens of the comp plan, and continue to update that annually as things change. Regional coordination, so many of the issues addressed in the plan are really regional issues, and as a regional service center, the city needs to be considering the impacts and ways to coordinate with other communities, other entities, the state, and also to leverage those resources, and thinking about ways to partner on programs, or partner to seek funding for projects that cross boundaries. And I think a lot of communities, like we see down in Portland, surrounding communities often looking to the bigger city to provide guidance and leadership on certain issues. And there are quite a few things that Ellsworth has done that is really serving as being a leader in those ways, and looking at opportunities to share information so that other communities can also move in the same direction, whether that's on climate planning or housing initiatives. The implementation plan, again, this is it's required for the plan to have an implementation plan. We have laid this out to include several different categories to support the implementation of the plan. We think that it's important to have an entity that is responsible for evaluating progress and updating the implementation plan on a regular basis. And we're planning for 10 plus years out, and so of course things change, different funding changes, priorities change, and things like with COVID happening, that was certainly unexpected and changed priorities for communities. So that's something that should be a active working document to be updated, and to for whoever is responsible to continue to follow up and to be the central coordinator of the plan implementation. So we have the complete list of policies and action items. You see just a snip of that on the bottom, tying that back to the key principle, as well as responsible agencies and collaborators. So there's a key along with that. It includes various city departments, other state and regional agencies, nonprofit organizations, other entities who could potentially be involved in addressing that particular action item. Cost, looking at just broadly for $1 sign, that's things that can be done within the current existing budget, and some things maybe don't require any additional funding, or can be done with existing staff capacity, and going up to $2 signs, that's things that need some additional funding, or maybe an additional staff person or part-time staff person. And then $3 signs is things that are larger capital projects where we really need to plan for or obtain grant funding for implementing those things. The ease of implementation, looking at the level of coordination required, so things that can be done just within one department are, we consider to be easy. We know that none of this is really easy, but things that require, actions that require more coordination of outside external entities, or require certain approvals, whether that's from this council or the state or other entities, that requires more coordination. Those are considered harder in terms of ease of implementation. Timeline, short, looking at starting and making progress within 2 years, medium 3 to 5 years, and long 6 or more years. We've also included a column related plans and studies, so that includes other city plans and studies, a business attraction plan, as well as this is the regional economic development strategy, kind of reinforcing the consistency of goals, not just within the city, across different areas and across different plans, but also for the region and the state as a whole. You know, Ellsworth is part of the broader community and working on some collaborative goals. We've also included links to in some cases, funding sources and best practice examples. Some of these action items might be new policies or new programs, and providing just an example of how another community has done this successfully. And so all of these categories combined, looking at, we haven't listed these in a particular priority order, but all of these categories combined are meant to provide guidance on thinking through, for the implementation committee to think through, what should we prioritize this year? What do we have funding for? How difficult is this going to be to coordinate responsible agencies and collaborators? Or what is the council's top priorities and concerns for this year? And then finally, Ally referenced some information in the appendices. This is all the background documentation, all of the information that informed the plan, the document itself. We have a glossary of terms. So there are certain terms that we use that might not be familiar to some people, so we've listed those. The reference plans and studies that are referenced throughout the document, a more detailed explanation of the community engagement and feedback received, and then the inventory analysis includes maps and data analysis, all of that impacting the content of the plan. All of that, I'm going to open it up to questions.
Yeah, so I mean, if any of you guys have questions, or after reviewing the plan, or you have more questions on the process, and
There's someone behind you that has a question.
Yeah, I just had my name's Tyler Crawford, by the way. The pinpoint survey, is that still
So,
active?
Tyler, would you mind going up to the podium just so that people who are watching
Oh,
can
yeah,
hear you?
for sure.
Otherwise, they won't be able to hear you without the microphone.
Yeah.
Thank
Wanna talk to the TV?
you.
Or do I-
Wherever you want.
Yeah, my question was on the pinpoint survey. Is that still active?
no, the social pinpoint survey was active at the beginning part of the plan, so probably like spring 2023 through 2020,
Okay,
end of 20, or beginning of 2024 at some point.
got it. Okay. And I also had this is my first time attending one of these meetings, and I appreciate John. I've kind of corresponded back and forth with him. I don't know if this is an appropriate time for me to kind of introduce myself and maybe ask some questions or talk just from my perspective on this, or if I'm going to disrupt the flow here, I can come back at a later time to the podium, or I don't know how you guys. All right, cool. And I just wrote some things down because I want to keep this as concise as possible here and try to not ramble on again. I don't want to disrupt the flow of this meeting. But as I said, my name's Tyler Crawford. Again, I'm not really familiar with what's been discussed at this meeting so far, or with this committee's overall perspective on certain topics with this. But in looking through this comprehensive plan, I came across some language that was kind of unsettling to me, specifically as it relates to regulating small businesses and short-term rentals. And I'm somebody, I'm a landlord, I own long-term and short-term rentals. I'm a resident of Ellsworth as well. And so I wanted to kind of just share my perspective on that. Again, I don't know how much I can really influence right now. I know this is already underway. But again, I just wanted to share my perspective. So just quick backstory, about 4 years ago, my wife and I decided to invest in real estate, become landlords. Today, we split our portfolio pretty even, or it's exactly evenly between long and short-term rentals. And the reason why we did this was because, one, of the increasing property taxes, and then interest rates. Obviously, you know, as a commercial real estate, it's not fixed like private, right? So, you know, you can get them 3, maybe 6 years, and a lot of people who maybe bought 4 or 6 years ago, or, you know, have to refinance now, are looking at double the interest rates. And we wanted to be able to offset that. And as somebody who has rented for most of my adult life, I hated every year my landlord coming to me and be like, hey man, rent's going up. And I didn't want to be that guy. And by adopting short-term, which is more profitable, which is why we decided to do it, to offset those costs, you know, I'm proud to say that I haven't in 4 years increased rent on my tenants, but it also allowed for us to make a lot of renovations that were desperately needed to the properties. A lot of the stuff that we own are, you know, built in the 1800s, you know, so, I mean, you know, of course, it enhanced the community, not only increasing our property value, but the, you know, the value of the properties around us. So, you know, of course, you know, subjectively here, I really am not for the regulation of this, but I wanted to bring some points, and I don't know if some of this has been talked about before, but, you know, New York City, a year ago today, recently, they enacted Local Law 18, which heavily regulated short-term rentals. And in that 1 year, because, I mean, New York, you know, viewed it obviously as a housing crisis, and this was the solution. They're like, hey, this is new, this is the enemy, let's go after it. In that 1 year, despite those regulations, rents in New York went up 3.4%, vacancy remained stagnant. Small businesses that relied on that foot traffic that were coming from the short-term rentals, they suffered from that. And many tourists were priced out of even coming, because the only people that benefited were the large hotel chains, which they saw their daily rates go up 7.4% year over year, which I think the national average was around like 2%. And again, this is something I found on LinkedIn. I think Harvard Business too, you can find that information as well. So I don't believe that, you know, and again, I recognize that Ellsworth is not New York City, and I think it's a good thing that we're not hamstringed by the problems of like South Portland or New York with limited land availability. We have an abundance of undeveloped land, as was previously mentioned on one of those slides there. And again, I don't claim to be a zoning expert at all when it comes to development and things like that, but I am pretty confident that we have a unique opportunity to both empower the residents of Ellsworth to continue to benefit from tourism, but incentivize builders and contractors to develop additional housing for inventory and affordability purposes. You know, in my honest opinion, I think the hard truth is, the way I see it is that if we want more inventory and we want more affordable housing, it's up for the city to take the lead on that initiative. The solution can't come at the expense of property owners by restricting our abilities to utilize properties in ways that align with our needs and goals. I think the city should be celebrating the achievements of the residents that are offering these guest experience, bringing and bolstering that economy, bringing that business to a lot of the small businesses, and earning a living, you know, off their properties. So again, like I said, I'm not exactly sure what's been mentioned in these meetings and what, you know, the overall perspective of the council members and other people that have attended, but I kind of wanted to share my experience with it and as a resident. And again, you know, I would just hate to see that negative connotation that Airbnb has taken on, you know, I believe unwarranted, because it's something that's new and not something that people understand, and it's an easy scapegoat. And I think that we need to replace that word Airbnb with our community members. They're leveraging it to create opportunities for themselves, for their families, but also contributing back to the local economy. And I think the real question is does this city, do we want its residents to thrive from tourism and share in this economic opportunities? Or would we rather companies like Hilton and, you know, have it go to the large hotel chains, which is what that domino effect is happening in other cities. So again, I really appreciate the time. And again, I want to thank John for inviting me and corresponding in emails and stuff like that. So that's what I got. Thanks.
I can just quickly touch on that. Like, I do know there's a broader, action item for short-term rental regulation or the potential for that, but, the steering committee didn't specifically discuss how or what that would look like. That's really the role of the council eventually, and then the planning board to make those types of decisions. But so, your point was taken, and when we have those conversations in the future, through different public engagements, please come and talk and speak to your experience then.
Yeah, absolutely, and sorry, I'll talk just one more.
And the reason why I brought up that pinpoint survey is I know that there's a lot of other small business owners, whether they own Airbnbs or local restaurants and shops and stuff that, you know, and again, it's on us not kind of paying attention. This has been happening since 2023. But, you know, I've gotten in touch with a lot of other like-minded people that are really interested. I know a lot of people couldn't make it due to weather tonight, but want to continue to be involved and stuff. So I want to find a way to get more people that, you know, and express those. Because I'm pretty sure I saw something with the survey responses were really limited compared to the overall population. So I think there's a lot of people now that have seen some of that verbiage that really want to, you know, express their, you know, share their personal experience and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that we can influence, and again, I'm sure it's pretty obvious in terms of how I'm talking that I lean more towards a libertarian point of view and my views of how much I want government involved, you know, in my day-to-day, which is, you know, honestly minimal. But you know, again, you know, the core of my belief is that, you know, with the taxes that we pay and all of that, regardless if people here have a dog in the race, you know, when it comes to this with short-term rentals and Airbnb and things like that, I think the principle of with the taxes that we pay, and as long as that we're operating within the bounds of the law, I don't think that it's warranted to regulate. And to my point, Airbnb is not the enemy when it comes to housing affordability or inventory. It is, if we want that, we need to find ways to create that. So, thank you again.
John, maybe you can shoot me his email, and then I can connect with
Yeah,
Tyler
I'll
separately,
I'll
yeah.
share that with you, Matt. Yeah, thank you, Tyler. It was really well thought out and informative. It would have been helpful, you know, months and months ago, but it
Yeah.
will also be helpful again as we get back into this. Obviously, the steering committee, and these guys can talk about that, the chair and vice chair, that we, even over the course of a year and a half, wouldn't have had time to dig into the bones and the details of all of these. You know, a lot of what you saw was went wide rather than deep on every single issue, just because there isn't that time, and really it's not the purview of the steering committee to get into the weeds about how do we regulate. It's really about where do we want to steer our focus and the discussion. So to me, the steering committee saying let's look at regulating housing and rentals is not the same as let's look at limiting or prohibiting, or it's just saying let's look at this. You know, are there things we can do? Are there ways that this is affecting the city as a whole? And then it's the council and planning department and housing coalition's job to look into the details of all that and to hear from folks from the community about specifically how it affects people. You know, because
And that's to add on that, you know, the steering committee didn't come up with it on its own. It was based off of the public engagement, which pretty overwhelmingly around housing wanted the city to look at short-term rental as specific use moving forward. Again, is it just registration? Is it regulation? Those decisions haven't been made yet, but the steering committee saw that it was a topic that the community wanted more engagement with. Yeah.
Cool.
I'm Leslie Harlow, I'm a resident of Ellsworth. This presentation was very nicely done. My biggest takeaway from it is one of the comments that one of the consultants made, which is cities like ours, because we're the biggest city in the area, are actually the leaders. And she made a very good point about Portland, for instance, that the surrounding communities really look at Portland to help them build their own, excuse me, I have a cold, to help them build their own policies. And I think one of the failures that we've had here in Ellsworth, and I've lived in this area for 52 years, is we have stepped away from being a regional leader. And I think we have a real opportunity to kind of collect our thoughts, collect our ideas, and with this visioning, to really keep that in mind. An interesting thing happened today, Facebook of all things, but Kyle Shank, who's one of the council people in Bar Harbor, he's a very articulate guy. I don't always agree with him on stuff, but he had a really good post today, and it's something that I've supported and talked about for a long time, is the idea of a regional commission to really talk about tourism and what that means to the region, because we, as Ellsworth, suffer the most. And we also can benefit the most economically, but not necessarily in terms of our lifestyles here as a year-round community. So I'm hoping that as we move into the future, first of all, I'm hoping we don't have to wait too many decades to get another comprehensive plan accomplished. I was involved in the last one, which was 20 years ago. I wasn't on the committee, but I had moved into Ellsworth from Sullivan, and I'd attended a bunch of those meetings. So I'm hoping that just as we step into this next kind of vision that we have for our city, that we really we really step back and look at ourselves, because we do have a great opportunity here. And I've invested heavily in Ellsworth. I own a home. I've owned several businesses here. I currently have a business. I employ people. I also have a business out in Hancock. I have Ironbound Restaurant. I employ a lot of people there. And I really get the value of tourism, but the balance of what it means for year-round lifestyles. So, but I really appreciate all the effort that's gone into this, and it says a lot about Ellsworth that we've had the patience to do this process. I wasn't on any of the committees, but I certainly went to a few of the meetings and really felt an opportunity to, put my own thoughts into it as well. And I also thank this young gentleman who spoke. He did a very good job. He made very good points. And the takeaway from that for me is basically, if we are going to balance tourism, we have to acknowledge that short-term rentals are part of the game. And that also means that most of these short-term rentals in this town are owned by local people. These aren't big corporations from elsewhere. And the point being, do you want to see a Hilton, or would you rather see a local person whose last name is Hilton who might be owning something? So, thanks a lot.
I'd like to comment about Tyler's input. I wish more people would come to this building and speak like you did. You stood up, you said what you thought, you were organized and polite. I think one of the things that I kept hearing in your speech was balance. And balance. And I think that the city of Ellsworth could take away a lot from that speech, just in the word balance. Not necessarily for just this comprehensive plan, but balance of everything, not just that subject. A good, strong balance. I like what you said about how you have balanced longer-term rentals with short-term rentals, and I'm sure in your business you can change gears in either way you wish. But I want to say thank you for coming, talking about that, and offering balance, because balance is important in all of government, not just this subject. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
The folks have said this, I think even a year and change ago, when we were engaging first with the consultants. The fear was and is, does this report now sit on a shelf somewhere and not get used? That's like the worry that everybody has. And I think the steering committee was and continues to be very engaged, which is helpful. And there was talk of establishing a continuation committee,
Implementation
implementation committee that would continue to come to talk to the council and be involved in City Hall and, you know, kind of keep poking us, hey, have you looked at this, have you looked at this, this was on the plan, here's how we can do it, here's the partners to engage with. I would maybe recommend or be excited about, you know, different counselors when we think about what are our goals for the next year or 2 or 3 years, depending on your term, picking things out from it, saying, well, I'm not really sure what I want to do, let me look through the comp plan, here's something that I engage with or have a background in or am excited about or can sort of visualize how to accomplish that. There's now a roadmap for not only priorities that you can be relatively confident that a good portion of citizens have weighed in and said this is something we want, but also now there's a couple bullet points below it saying here's who you can work with, here's a couple steps to get you there. And it might just take, you know, 1 or 2 of us focusing specifically on something or taking recommendations from the implementation committee. And I think there are things we can tackle in the next year or 2, 3.
I'd agree with that, John, and I think build on it. People at home can't see, but the city manager is in the back of the room, paying very close attention to what we're doing. And this is the stuff that inspired me to run for city council. I was on the steering committee from the comprehensive plan when this opportunity came up. Having completed my first year, there was a lot of housekeeping that had to be done here before we could get into the really thoughtful progress on how we grow and what we do from here. So I think with Charlie has already started to look at the 2025 plan, that these can be incorporated. We've all, you know, expressed our various interests in being involved. I was on the housing task force. You've been involved with the hunger and homelessness, more the immediate need issues. Tabby, I know you're gonna step in with what your special interests are, and of course Steve as well. So I'm really excited for the timing for this, that the city is in good shape, I think, with the residents that are here, the businesses, leadership, and even staff, that we really can start looking at, okay, let's take it, what do we do? And how do we divide up the work? What are the quick wins? It's important to have the quick wins so that we can acknowledge something is happening while we're also focusing on the significant things that will take longer. So I think the timing for this, I feel it, and I hear other people saying, we are at a moment in time in Ellsworth. And I think having a really thoughtful, comprehensive plan being presented at this time is going to be a game changer for us and give us the structure and the direction that you're talking about. And I think that Charlie will be able to help guide all of us in with support from his staff. So I'm excited, and I enjoyed, I think I was on the steering committee for maybe 5 or 6 months at the most, and enjoyed that time and want to thank you. I know there were intense conversations of people who care about the city, and that's an amazing place to start from.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great group to work with. It was 12 people to start, but 10 that stuck through the entire process all the way. And you have to run for council, so we understand. But it was a great group. There was thoughtful, respectful discussion every month. And again, like...
And even, I mean, and friendly.
Yes.
The people were enjoying themselves, which is not always the case.
Yeah. And I'll just, to emphasize your point, that the steering committee really looked at balancing, you know, big, ambitious ideas with, you know, the more mundane, like deferred maintenance or smaller things that just happen during normal city work, but maybe haven't been done as regularly as they should. And I'm trying to make sustainability for each of those things a goal.
Some of the stuff we've been doing, I describe housework, which is not my favorite way to spend my time. You only notice it when it's not being done. And I think that's what we've seen with the work that we've all done over the last year. And I mean broadly, all this that we've been doing on, there's basic housekeeping that we've done. So now we've got the house in order. Let's look at how we move forward from here. So, and Matt, you've been a big part of this, so thank you for your work in this as well.
I want to thank the steering committee, Barry Dunn, planning board who voted to recommend adoption to the council last night, and then the community as a whole. I mean, there were a lot of times where I couldn't give the plan the attention it deserved, but the steering committee and Barry Dunn filled in those gaps very well. So I appreciate all the support.
Great. I had lots of thoughts, but I want to digest them and spend more time with the plan before Monday.
Matt, for people watching at home, can you talk just briefly about next steps? I know that this will come before the council at our December meeting, and then after that, maybe for folks like Tyler and Leslie who are thinking about when things come up again, more specifically.
Yeah, so, you mentioned the plan is going before council at the December 16th meeting for adoption. After that, if the council does vote to adopt it, it'll go to the state. I do have a checklist of state compliance requirements that have to go into the plan. It's kind of dry, I don't have to read through all of it, but we made sure we checked off all the compliance materials. And so then after that, if the state does accept the plan, it's in effect, which means it's a lot of state grant programs or funding opportunities like to see a completed comprehensive plan and referencing them in the grant applications. You know, the implementation plan also had other regional or local plans that touch on some action items, so it's multiple planning initiatives and community feedback exercises that might suggest an action item is desired or a good idea, so it helps build support for the funding opportunities. And so it's up to, you know, really, so the idea is that the steering committee will become the implementation committee. The role of that has yet to be fully defined and figured out, but really it's the idea of that this will be a group of citizens, whether it's people that are currently on the steering committee who'd like to stay on, but these volunteers have given up a lot of time and only volunteered for 2 years, so it may be new people, maybe doing a new recruiting process for the implementation committee. You know, some counselors, 2 counselors should probably stay on it. But they will kind of work with, probably through workshop type of methodology, with the council and the city manager and staff to kind of look at the plan. And once council is kind of given directive on some of the priorities they'd like to see happening, again, in the short term, long term, just kind of touching base with staff to make sure that, you know, progress is being made, how it's being made, what the plans for each of those action items are. And just being kind of community voices to let people know, you know, the city's doing work, it's not sitting on your tax dollars. And then, but in tangent with the comprehensive plan, we're also doing a housing study, which really would tie into some of the ideas that like Tyler talked about, but also additional ways to incentivize housing that people can live in year round and that sort of thing. A lot of that requires a lot of legislative changes through the city, so then there's gonna be multiple public hearings for those sorts of things. There may be focus groups and task force associated with those and workshops, so you know, like get Tyler's email so I can make sure he's on everything with housing, but you know, paying attention to keeping an eye out, but showing up, because, you know, people's voices do matter, but if no one's talking, it's just me.
You've got good ideas.
Sometimes.
Are you done? So, my question beyond John's question is, it's been 20 years, and it's supposed to be done every 10. What prevents a view or an update every 3? Is there something in the system that prevents this? Because while this is being inked and approved, the world is spinning very fast. And is there an opportunity to update this every 3 years, every 5 years? I don't mean to make everybody work twice as hard as what they have, but when everyone that's been involved in this basically had to start from scratch when you got a 20-year-old plan. Is that fair? So is there any value in the city revisiting this after it's approved and accepted and all of that? Or is that just not how the world works in comprehensive plans?
No, there's nothing that would really prevent an update every 3 years. That may be too quick of a cycle, so the plan has a lot of action items in it. Probably unrealistic to complete all of them in 10 years to start. So if the council sees that some aren't relevant anymore, or maybe isn't feasible or as feasible as originally thought, you know, that could be part of the implementation committee's task, is to kind of keep notes and keep track of these sorts of things. But you can update the plan, so 5-year updates are common, they're not uncommon to see municipalities do a 5-year update instead of wait for 10 years. It's just a quicker, they don't update the entire plan, they might look at specific areas and then, resubmit them to the state to be like, well, we changed our mind. Or we see this trend happening.
And I'm not suggesting that, I'm asking that question because it seems like everyone involved in this plan, you know, is trying to overcome 20 years, and, or maybe just a 10 years is something that we need to focus on, but maybe it's 5, whatever it might be, I just would hate to have to go through this agony of going 20 years.
No, I mean, you're correct, it just kind of depends on what happens. I mean, if we had completed a comprehensive plan in 2018, and 2019 hit and COVID happened, you know, after the 3-year stretch of COVID roughly, you probably would want to do an update to your plan. The world did change, a lot of trends got thrown off of whack, so the plan may not have been as relevant anymore. So it's really just, again, the council and staff working together, keeping an eye on trends and seeing how things are going in the city and determining if this plan still represents what the community wants or what's happening in the community, and then making adjustments from there.
About the people here that did the work, is 10 years, is 5 years, is
No, but I-
20 years?
But I think, Steve, that middle ground is, and Nancy and I served together in the legislature, but often what happened with task force and studies much like this would, when they implemented something like this, would ask for an annual report back. So it's what I would like to see personally from all the work for 2 years that this group put in, to say, you know, January 15th, pick a day each year, there'll be, and put it in sort of in statute, when you do a formal vote, there'll be a report back from the city to the council on where we stand on the comprehensive plan. Now, you'll be looking at it all along as you go along in doing these things, but kind of a date set in stone. We're gonna have a report back formally to the city council that people could, you know, like the community could plan on sitting in the back of the room on that day and say, where are we in our plan? And personally, I'd like to kind of see that, you know, kind of go along with the vote to approve it at some point.
I would love to add to that, Jen, if you wanted to.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think that's perfectly fair to ask for a year, like a report, like the other commissions all have to report at the end of the year, and I think that this implementation committee should just be included in that expectation. And then there are items that we can prioritize some things that, you know, they're more important, and then other things, we might think they're important now, and then as we look at it, it doesn't get done, and it's like, okay, well, it just gets bumped down if it ends up not being relevant through the entire process.
I think that would satisfy kind of what you were just alluding to, like, hey, you know, we're not gonna start, you know, from scratch again, and after 20 years, you know, and the world is spinning fast. Some things will be out of favor, some other things might get jumped onto the list.
And to add to those comments, once we have fulfilled the state requirements and they've approved it and we've done the checklists, it's ours. And we own it, and we get to decide what happens with it. And that weird phrase about it being a living document, but this should be a touchstone for the council, for city staff on, okay, where are we gonna prioritize? And I think even the annual report, it's exactly where I was thinking, is an annual report back. And make it a celebration. If we set it as once a year on a certain date, I think align it with when the work plans are coming together, building the budget, like, as we're building towards what's next, take the time, because we forget to do that too, to celebrate what we have done. Rather, there's the joy of checking things off the list. But after a year, go back and say, how many things have we checked off the list? Or how many steps have we made on those bodacious goals while we've picked off some of the easy ones? We forget to celebrate our wins, and that's a lot of what leads to exhaustion, is you feel like you're always working and never getting anywhere. So I think an annual look back, celebrate where we've been, look forward, and then the reframe of, okay, what are we doing next, would be an empowering way to make sure that the document isn't irrelevant and doesn't sit forever. So there's a lot we can do. I'm excited to hear that the steering committee, at least there's the energy for some to look at, okay, we do need an implementation team who will look at continuing to guide and remind the council and city staff on, remember, here are the priorities that we looked at. So it's exciting to see folks here tonight with that idea in mind. And my last comment, separate from that, is, to the consultants as well as to the larger group, I'm so happy to see so much smart growth in here about, we have rural areas that it does not make sense to put housing out where it's gonna require more buses, more snowplows, more salt, all of the costs. And that we're looking at where does it make sense? Are there nodes that do make sense? I wanna look more into this, the village centers as ideas about where more housing would make sense, rather than sprawling growth, and really investing in the downtown that's so unique. And it's part of what drew me here, along with the amazing culture and people that are here. So I was happy to see smart growth prominently in the pieces that we're talking about tonight.
We do have a last sort of comment too. It feels like sort of getting towards wrapping up, that the staff here, Matt and Brittany, have done a fabulous job, kind of keeping things organized and on track, and the folks at Barry Dunn too really went out of their way to work well when, a couple times we kind of said no to things, and we want to, have them spit things back a little differently, and they begrudgingly, maybe not quite so begrudgingly, but said, okay, we'll go back to the drawing board and send it back to you another way. So, truly, they gave us a product that, that we wanted to have as an end product.
It's good to hear. That sense of ownership is critical to doing anything from here.
I'll shout out former planning assistant Elizabeth Ouellette, because she also played a big role.
Yeah, the front half of it,
Magical,
yeah.
True.
So, no more comments? I mean, continue to read the plan, think about it. You have a couple, only a week, maybe 2 weeks. Week and a half. Sorry, Thursday. And we'll either continue conversation Monday and have their probably brief review, kind of similar presentation, but maybe a little bit shorter, just in case people from the public couldn't watch this workshop. There's still kind of an overview for them to hear at the council meeting, and then if there are other councilors who weren't here tonight, they'll have a chance to also discuss a little bit further. So.
And I haven't opened the agenda yet. Does that include a public hearing
Yes.
on it?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Cool, thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Thank you all for your time.